Hey, everybody. My name is Mark, and welcome to this week's Menlo Midweek podcast. A bit of a different episode this week, as in just a minute, we're actually going to jump out of the studio that we're recording in here and jump into where we've recorded some of the interviews that you've seen if you've been with us for the last couple weeks of our Startup Faith series. We've introduced snippets of the conversation that we're about to hear on the weekends, on Sundays, in our services where we've asked a question and got to hear from members of our community that are either involved in startups or in the tech space to get how their perspectives on how the modern day tech startup space is reflected in the early church. Aisha and Jen are our two volunteer interviewers. If you see them around the campuses this week or at any point, let them know what a great job that they did. I was there during the recording and they were just doing an amazing job. And I'm super excited to release the full version of these interviews because there is a lot of wisdom and a lot of experience that not only the interviewees had, but also the interviewer. So I'm super excited to bring this to you. And I know that this time will be both edifying as well as provide some tips and some things to think about as we're trying to bring hope to the spaces where we live, work, and play. So I'm super excited for this. Let's go ahead and cut into that place now.
So please tell us your name and which campus you serve at.
Diane Flynn, and I worship at the Menlo Park campus.
So Diane, tell us about your startup. Why did you decide to do the startup? What problem were you trying to solve?
So I had a career that I loved, and then I had 3 children, and somehow my career and being a mom were challenging, and I ended up pausing my career for what turned into a 16-year pause. And then about a decade ago, I decided to reenter the workforce full time. And when I did that, I live here in Menlo Park, and I was sharing with women at my kids' school that, I'm going back to work and excited. And the overwhelming response I got from so many women was, I would love to do that. But what I kept hearing is, I'm not current with today's technologies. I'm not connected with a professional network. And what killed me was I had no confidence because these were women I'd worked with on the parent board at school, and I would hire any of these women if I were an employer. And I felt like there's a big gap in accessing incredible talent in our community and talent that wants to work for all kinds of reasons. And so anyway, I kept hearing this. I'm not current, connected, and confident. And I thought, I love teaching and encouraging and helping people. And I had just done it myself. And so grabbed a group of 4 other women to help me start this initiative, which has now become my life purpose. But it was called, I had my daughter design a little logo, Reboot, because we were rebooting careers. And I would whip out the logo at dinner parties and say, what do you think of this idea? Is this a good idea? And I got a lot of encouragement. And so we just started doing it. And it expanded. I then, after a few years of doing it, quit my full-time job and did this instead because I just felt so sparked by this calling. And then we expanded into 7 cities. That ended up not being a great idea in the end because it just wasn't lucrative for the people doing it, and they were doing it to make money. So we pivoted a lot. We're still going. I have a team that is focused on that. And the work I'm doing now has kind of shifted to leadership development with companies and executive coaching and offsite facilitation.
Well, thank you very much. That was really great to hear about how you went from having a full-time job to receiving the call to step back from work outside of the home to raising your children for 16 years, and then how you responded then to the next call to do Reboot. I want to talk all about that. But, for now, I just want to understand, um, can you talk to us about the dream that you had? What was it about helping women to reconnect, to build their confidence? What was that dream like? And what was a problem that you were trying to solve through your dream?
Yes, great question. I guess one of my values, well, I always think about what I am gifted at and what the world needs and what I'm passionate about. It's called Ikigai, if you've heard of that. And what I realized is that there is a huge need for women uh, to find purpose. What I would hear a lot is for the last 15 years, my purpose was my children, and now my purpose has left the house, and I had no purpose. And I felt this myself to some extent. I still had a child at home. I felt this myself to some extent. I still had a child at home, but he was in 8th grade and he was playing football and he was gone all day. And I really felt like I wanted to do more and give back and just actually have some fun, earn some money. And I think this is a need a lot of people have, whether they want it because finding purpose, or for a lot of them, they were widowed, divorced, needed the financial uh, wherewithal to, to cope and to live. And so it was to serve all those needs, to help other people, uh, inspire them to bring their gifts and talents to the world in a way that brings them joy and purpose and also some financial uh, rewards.
That's great. So, helping people find purpose. Can you relate to how, you helping these women find purpose? How does that relate to Jesus and his ministry when he started to gather his disciples?
So there's three parallels that I can see with Jesus in the early church. One is he was called to purpose. Yeah, had a very clear purpose to bring people to faith and to deliver hope and healing and transformation. I think that's very similar to how I felt called and still feel called. Second, he gathered community. And I'm a huge believer. I have a personal mantra, which is around engaging in creative collaboration with people I respect to change lives and build community. That's something that's really valuable to me and meaningful, and I love building community. And so Reboot became a community, just like Jesus built his community of disciples. And then the third is around empowering for teaching. And I think of Jesus and his parables. And I happen to love teaching. And uh, by being vulnerable and sharing my story of how I, struggle with confidence, or, being 50 and going back into the workplace and working with 23-year-olds, who would call me Mrs. Flynn. And I would ask the guy next to the young person, I say, like, I do this. How do you do that? And he would say, well, let me just Google that. And I'm like, well, I can Google that. And so it was putting on a growth mindset and saying, I am capable of learning at any age. I had a new course on AI for work and how to work better, faster. And partly I love doing that. I created it with a 40-year-old male who teaches at Stanford. And I want to inspire people in their 60s and beyond that you are never too old to learn. And I think that Jesus was constantly helping people grow in their faith. And uh, I don't know if he said it in the Bible, but I'm quite sure he never said there was an age limit. And so I like to channel that with the people I serve.
That's amazing. You alluded earlier when you were explaining to us how Reboot even came to be, that you had started to grow across a bunch of different cities and that led to a pivot. And that just takes me myself as a startup founder to, the unforeseen challenges, right? And the terrain that you face being a founder. Um, there will be challenges, right? It's generally never up and to the right. And so I'd love to hear your perspective on how you tackle those challenges, thinking about it from the perspective or from the lens of how, how Jesus dealt with so many different challenges, which ultimately led to his death. But even before he died, he knew he was coming to die. But at some point said, if you can take this cup away from me, that would not be a bad thing. There are challenges that we face. How would you address those challenges in your journey as a startup founder?
Well, I'll speak to one challenge that was this year. As I mentioned, the team still works with women rebooting careers, but my personal work is with people in companies. And I have been very deep in the inclusive leadership space for the last 4 years. And a lot of my clients, it's been boom times until recently, because everybody was very interested in being more inclusive. And I wrote a book on inclusive leadership, and all of a sudden, because of the changing pendulum swings, that business really dried up. And I lost 3 big clients in the course of 4 months. And, you take a confidence hit.
Yeah.
It's like, I kind of thought this was where God wanted me, but then you think, well, I lost these clients. The tide is shifting. Is this really where he wants me? And, well, it's easy to kind of wallow in self pity or scaling down. And I did for a brief time, but then I thought, what is God teaching? And where does God want me? And is there a new direction? And so I went on a 6 to 8 week listening tour, and I went and had coffee with friends and people who knew me well, and I asked a few questions. I said, uh, "Where do you think I'm uniquely gifted? What is a problem the world needs? And where can I serve best?" And I really felt I learned a lot in that process. And uh, it was my way of listening to God. I spend time in prayer, but I also listen to people. I think that's how God speaks to me oftentimes. And since then, this AI course has come about. I have a few new relationships. I have some new clients, some new opportunities. I'm not doing as much around inclusive leadership, although that is a pillar of everything I do when I coach leaders. It's just not coming out of those particular budgets right now. But I'm working with the Christian community at the GSB at Stanford. I'm in this 9-month program with Phil on faith, work, and tech with 8 other individuals. And so I'm, embarking on some new directions that I never would have imagined. And I have to say, I'm happier than I've probably ever been. And so I think sometimes, we have to get taken down or taken into those scary and uncomfortable places to, get on our knees and listen to where God is calling us next. And I don't think there is one path for us. I think our life is a series of twists and turns and pivots. And for me, it's about always being open to listening and seeing where He's calling me next.
I'm Andrew Rogers. I've been in the Bay Area for about 13 years now, working in tech and startups primarily. And I joined Menlo Church with my family in, the beginning of 2023.
Awesome. So when you, as a fellow startup founder myself, generally you have this idea, there's a dream or a vision that comes to you, and there's a problem that you are really trying to address. Can you talk to us a little bit about those things for you? Was there a light bulb moment? What was the dream, the vision, and what exactly is the problem that you're trying to address through your startup?
Yeah. So my company is called Bible Chat. We sell an app for the Bible for people to ask questions about the Bible and learn things. So that's what we do. BibleChat.ai is our website. And frankly, when I started this season in Bible Chat just almost 2 years ago now, I didn't actually have a plan. I was kind of looking for something to do. I had recently left a startup that I had founded and didn't have any kind of plan. I just was trying to listen to what God was telling me. And at that time, there was the new AI kind of OpenAI ChatGPT revolution happening. And I thought, well, how could we use this for the Bible? Or how could we use this to help spread the gospel? And that's when I started working on the very first version of Bible Chat. I didn't have any plans going forward. I just was trying to listen to him and just be faithful and trust in him that he would provide a way for me to get back into a company that could sustain, my family and pay me a salary eventually and all of that. And so that's where it started. It was a very slow process at the beginning. So our vision and our mission is to make um, the Bible accessible to all people around the world, with no barriers, not location, not language, no spiritual familiarity or familiarity with the Bible. Um, Lower all barriers to entry, basically, to learn. And that's what we're trying to do at Bible Chat. And we use the AI technology to help people get answers to the questions that they have. So we use models that have been trained on biblical content, for example. It's a chat-based application. At this point, we have, hundreds of thousands of users all around the world in 190 countries that are speaking very languages in the app. Um, and I'll talk a little bit about the prayer wall, probably in another question, but there's been a community that's been created around this app, and people are praying for each other and they're supporting each other, and there's no barriers on language because everything is translated in the language that we speak. So people are interacting across the world, just a community of believers.
Fabulous. So I love that, you're spreading the gospel. And obviously, this is what Jesus and his disciples were trying to do. But I imagine, like any other startup and just like the early church too, you've probably experienced some challenges. Can you speak a little bit to how you've overcome these challenges? And can you relate it a little bit to the early church and how it's changed from, then and now?
Yeah, one of the biggest challenges that we faced early on was how to monetize the app and how to sustain the company financially. Um, we had a tremendous impact, and we are having a tremendous impact. The application is on people's lives and their spiritual journeys and their walks with Christ. And the app has always been free, and it still remains free for anyone to use. And there was a moment when it was very unclear to me how this could ever be sustainable. But I prayed about this, and I asked God to give me guidance on how I can move forward and try to make this financially sustainable. And it was very clear his challenge to me, which was keep the app free. It's too important uh, as a technology to put a paywall in front of it and not give it away. And so I said, okay. I said, yes, yes, I understand. Let's figure out another way to do it. And what that led to was the development of a unique monetization strategy for us, which we took inspiration from the TV show The Chosen. So we developed a pay it forward model, which we call it, where users who can afford a monthly subscription are purchasing 1 month sponsorships for other users to use the app for free for a month. And God has been very faithful in following through and making a way. And up to this point, we've been able to sustain the app, and we've never run out of subscriptions that people have paid for. Yeah, so our cup kind of has runneth over since we introduced that. And just very blessed to have such a generous community of believers supporting each other. And, if I relate it to the early church, I think, when the early Christians were starting out, they faced many hardships, resources, certainly persecution, and just being led by the Spirit and trying to, there was no playbook, there was no church body of theological knowledge at all. It was mostly just faith and prayer and community. And so I think, our community in Bible Chat is similar in that way. I mean, it's a group of believers from all across the world, all different walks of life in almost every country that are coming together and supporting each other, financially, but also with encouragement and prayer.
Mm.
Wow. So I'm going to ask a question, so many things. But I was reading recently about the story of Daniel. And it came to me when you were just talking now, about such a strong belief in what you should be doing, right? And I mean, obviously, I'm assuming you were not put in a pit of fire or his den. You could tell me. Mm. You can tell me if that did happen to you. But just that, I can see how you get to a point where you're saying, okay, what I'm doing is really good, but I can't afford to continue to do this. And there's got to be the level. Then there's how do you bridge that faith walk to, okay, I need to seek your face, Lord, and I need you to respond to me to what to do so that I take direction. Can you just share with us what that bridge looked like and how you crossed it?
I think, uh, we can talk about the the challenges that you have as a believer when you're either on the mountain or in the valley and walking forward. For me, when I started Bible Chat, I was in a place, I was a little bit lost to what I was supposed to be doing. I had just left a startup and um, I didn't have a clear indication of what I was going to do next. Um, Fortunately, my wife works and she has an income that can help. But it was, very clear that eventually I'd have to be doing something that would bring in some money for just living. And um, I just started working. I feel like the moment that I started Bible Chat, I didn't know what was going to happen going forward. But I had this peace and this tremendous just reassurance come upon me over those first few months of this is what you're supposed to be doing. So I didn't know how it was going to turn out, but there was a level of trust that I had in God and faith that he would find a way. And it was only until I started looking backwards, the hand of God in this journey that I've been on. When, for example, we got picked up by a couple podcasts and I had some interviews that led to a tremendous amount of user growth. Or when we had launched the Pay It Forward feature and we saw a tremendous amount of revenue come in because people were eager to help support the app because it had just been so good to them or been so helpful for them. And so there was these moments of just reassurance or validation that that God gave me, and I just recognized that it was His doing. I mean, this is what we do when we thank God for all the blessings in our life. At the table, thank you for the bounty you provided us on the table when we go to eat because He's making a way. And so it's recognizing that's certainly been helpful, and then just committing to it, just praying and committing to moving forward, and just trusting and having faith. I think that's what's led me to the place where we are now, which is where we are financially sustainable and we're experiencing success and things are really working out well for the app. It's all God. I mean, at the end of the day, He's the one that put this path before me, and I just had to walk down that road.
You trusted and you obeyed.
That's right.
Love it.
Wow.
Hi everyone, I'm Norm Liang. I have been in the Bay Area since 2001, and I've been going to San Mateo campus since 2008.
Awesome. So we're going to kick off this conversation, and I think the context is you as a startup founder, but as a startup founder of faith, and really creating that parallel with the early church 2,000 years ago. Okay. Well, I'm going to ask the question. I'm just setting up, where the question is coming from. And I think, most startup founders, at least Jennifer and I can, attest to this. You start with a dream or you start with a vision, or you start with a problem. What is the problem that you're trying to solve? Can you tell us the dream and or problem that you sought out to solve and what that is?
I mean, growing up, with the first generation of the internet, when people had a second phone line that was, you were like, oh my gosh, somebody's calling. No, don't call because I'm trying to do something online. That's where the dream started. It was really just being online and just thinking about all the different things that we could do to manage and share a little bit about our lives online. I think I grew up, sitting around a living room watching slideshows in a slide projector where after family vacations, like we would actually get the photos developed and film get developed into slides. And then we would project them on the wall and we'd be like, oh, remember that? But but growing up with the internet, I started thinking about like, what if we could share those photos online instantly with anybody, any of our friends and family anywhere in the world? And that was really how it started. And so through that, we kind of had this dream of being able to connect and share moments from our lives with people online.
Can you add to that? Not just the dream and the problem, but relate it to, you're talking about the dream and sharing your life online. Can you relate that to maybe possibly how Jesus even thought about getting his disciples? How do you corral people to want to follow you on this dream and to address this problem in the same way Jesus did with his disciples 2,000 years ago?
I think with followers, I think it's the more that he could share, right? I don't think, Jesus dreamed of like everything to be in these like small living rooms, hidden away from people, trying to find out, who is this guy telling this story and talking about, this eternal life. And I think that parallel was, you should be able to find that anywhere. And I think if Jesus lived today, I think the gospel, all of it is so available in so many places. It touches us in so many moments, like digitally, physically, even church, right? We watch streams, online. I think all of these things, it's like the dream is, how do you be in more places than one, to reach as many people as possible?
Yeah, I think that, you know, that is like the Great Commission, right? To spread the word to, everybody. Um, as part of that, have you experienced any challenges of um in spreading the word to people, or like how can you relate it to the early church and the challenges that the early church experienced from when it began to now?
I think every founder wants everything to be, within their control. And you start to realize it's not really. There are some things that we can manage, but the thing that creates the most anxiety and the most stress for founders today is probably things that are way beyond your control. You start trying to think like, what if the world was, and you start dreaming about the possibilities where like those limits don't exist. The reality for startup founders is like, there are limits. You have to decide, what can I control today and how can I manage for today and really be in the present moment. And I think that really goes back to what even the early days of the church had to think about. What's within our control and what's not within our control.
Yeah.
And I think Jesus just had this incredible ability to listen and hear. And I think the stories that are told in the Bible, I think tell us, what do we do when things are out of our control? Where do we go? Where do we look, for that guidance? Just what direction should I turn my head?
Yeah. As we think about, I love the example you just gave, because if you think about in the early church, there's a part of the Bible where Jesus was in a boat with the disciples and it was rocking quite aggressively. And I think he was in the back sleeping. And the disciples are like, hey, what's going on? Like, we're about to die. You're sleeping. Wake up. And I think Jesus said, oh, ye of little faith. Right. And that hit me as you were talking. And I'd love to get your reflection about faith when you had these unforeseen challenges, because in the early church, Jesus was unfazed by the rocking of the seas in the way that the disciples were. And I think his call was to have faith. How do you live that as you face challenges as a startup founder? Do you find yourself in the rocking boat and sometimes scared, or are you like super chilled like Jesus?
No, I mean, you always find yourself in the rocking boat. And really, it just boils down. It just really comes down to transparency. I think just talking about how I'm feeling, openly sharing and just saying, hey, I'm feeling like this is out of control, and I just want you to know, like, feeling out of control and it's okay. We'll manage this together. And then you start to talk and you start to have community and you start to, try to address it with one another and look at it from different perspectives. And I think that really is the only thing that you can do when it feels like it's out of control is to get that perspective. But, as a leader, as a leader in faith, like you have to really think about, how do I do this in a vulnerable way? How do I let them know that, yeah, like I have trust, but I am nervous. I am scared. I don't know what's coming. And oftentimes you hear a lot about founders and serial entrepreneurs talking about what do they do when things are beyond their control? And the best leaders I've heard, have gone to council. They've sat at the table, they've talked to one another, and they said, okay, and they've come up with a solution together. And I think that's really all we can do as leaders of faith.
My name is Milo, and I attend the Menlo Park campus of Menlo Church.
So, just in your words, what was the dream in doing your startup, and what problem were you trying to solve?
So I'm on my third startup, fourth, if you count my time at Google Fiber, where we were building that as part of Google. The first company, at Home Network, the problem there was people were experiencing internet on dial-up. And I worked with the cable operators to build broadband infrastructure, build standard modems like DOCSIS, et cetera, deliver broadband, always on connectivity at twice the price for 100 times the bandwidth.
Wow. All right. So that's one of your startups.
Yeah.
Tell us about another one.
At Fiber, I did the same thing. We did 100 times faster for about twice the price, this time competing with the cable infrastructure I helped build before. Because in 25 years, since the first startup I did at home, the cable operators had become very powerful and dominant, and speeds had not really gone up that much. And so there was an opportunity to remove those bottlenecks and try a different kind of technical business and marketing approach. And then my last startup, the current one, and I is about a year and a half old, I'm working to build a satellite constellation that fully supports enterprise connectivity, dual use, so civil and government, that is resistant to electronic warfare and jamming, capable of closed user groups because most enterprises don't need to talk to Russian trolls and Nigerian princes, and more symmetric and sort of higher upstream speeds, because it's very difficult to build one transport network that can do everything enterprise wants and hit the consumer price point. We don't see that in how we build our terrestrial networks, and so that's what we're working on now.
So this is very fascinating. I want to ask you a question that's not on the list of questions, but it just is my interest. Sure. If I think about, your earlier work, going from dial-up to broadband fiber and just being able to have to be tip deep. I think my point is really now, and a lot of the work that you've done, you can propagate information far more than before you started. And if you think about the early church, Christ was working with disciples, right? And the whole point of working with disciples, making people fishers of men, is that each person goes out and fishes and, tells the story. And even after his death, one tells 10, 10 tells 100, and that's how we propagate, right? So I was thinking of that parallel, but I would love to hear your perspective. If you've ever thought about the work that you're doing in that way. And
I think, the new company is called Logos Space Services because it's moving knowledge. And if you think about the biblical history, right, this kind of movement that really could spread all over the world was not really possible until the time that it happened, because you had the Roman roads, you had the transportation system, you had the ability for people to move around and exchange information. Today, the internet, well, it's not primarily used for this, is a tremendous vehicle that can be used for evangelism, for dissemination, for providing human connectivity, to share stories, to encourage each other, and to become more knowledgeable about the scripture that we all believe and study.
Mm. So, I mean, with any startup, there's always challenges, and you've done a few now. Can you relate some of these challenges and how you've adapted to these challenges to maybe some of the problems that the early church experienced?
Yeah, my first startup, we had most of the cable operators on our board of directors, and they didn't really compete with each other, but they had conflicting visions of products and future. Originally, they wanted our broadband service because they thought it would keep their video consumers from moving to satellite. They didn't think of it as a mass market product, but something that was focused on sort of premium customers. We believed that that was actually a mass market business. And ultimately, that proved true, but it also proved to be way too important for them to trust a third party. And so that led to a whole set of corporate challenges that we had to navigate. You see that in the church too, right? That the apostles had this Christianity was a transformation of Judaism, and you see that the heritage of the Old Testament and the value add that the rabbis had added on to it, right? The religious elite, that challenge of governance. And you see that in Acts, right? And when the council meets to say, hey, what of the law do we force new believers to adopt, right? Remember, at the time, they didn't have the New Testament there. And so, abstain from idols, don't drink blood, and flee sexual immorality. That was the core, right, of the message of the apostles there. And they had to work out this issue of how that new church was going to be governed. And then you see it also in Acts where the apostles say, hey, we've got to delegate, the work here. That's what deacons were doing. They wanted to be focused on what God was calling them to do and not try and do everything. And that's always the challenge in a startup too, right? Like, how do you govern? What do you do versus your team, or all the rest of that? So there's a lot of similarity.
Thanks so much for joining us today, and we hope that those conversations were edifying for you. We hope that you got some nuggets of wisdom or things to think about this week. And if you're like me and wish this episode didn't end, well, you're in luck because we have another half of these interviews to come. So be on the lookout for that, the last week of this series. And we're just so excited that we are, as a community, living out what the early church has started. And so as you go out this week, we pray that you can have a wonderful week. If you need any prayer or encouragement, you can text our team at 650-600-0402. And if you want to get involved and help us do creative things like this, we'd love to have you on the team. Both Aishe and Jen should be familiar faces at this point to you. They are volunteers that said yes to trying to interview and get involved in this space. And so we would love if this is something that you would like to get involved with as well, whether you have experience or not. We'd love to chat with you. So you can text that same number about that. Have a wonderful week, everybody, and we'll see you this weekend as we continue in our Startup Face series. Have a great week. See ya.